So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. I want to welcome everybody to today's call. I know there's still a number of people joining. My name is Joshua Wenner, and I'm the president of Co-Founders Lab. This is a call that is part of our Startup Accelerator. Our Startup Accelerator is an online virtual accelerator where we help entrepreneurs go from idea, build out the MVP, product market fit, figure out fundraising or financial projections, marketing, legal, and move all the way into building their pitch. And we do pitch practices about every 3 weeks. So it's a good chance to walk through those steps. And
there's so many people.
Mute, a couple people unmuted. 1 second. Okay. And we do these calls weekly, and we invite members from the community sometimes to lean in and check in with the calls. So we do give first priority to getting their questions answered from Co-Founders Lab Accelerator members. So in the chat box.
To fill up the streets here in Los Angeles, block by block. And if you can take
a couple of unmutes, kept getting unmuted. So heard some Los Angeles news going on. When you're typing in, if you have any questions about your startup, we have 2 advisors on today. And I want to make sure they're on. I saw Amy, I saw you. If you can unmute yourself, Amy.
I think I can do that.
Okay, great. That way we got you. And then Stephen.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, there you are. So we have, in addition to the Co-Founders Lab Startup Accelerator, we had so many members from our accelerator saying, how do I find good mentors? Who do I trust? I know I need help. I don't know where to go. So we created the Co-Founders Lab Advisor Network, where we went through Co-Founders Lab and people that had marked themselves as advisors, and we started vetting advisors to figure out who's legitimate, who has real world experience, and who could add value. So we vetted 50 plus advisors, and every one of these calls, we invite advisors onto the call, and it's a great chance to get perspective from people that have been there, have different perspectives, and to give you the advice that you need. So I have both Amy and Steve. So we have 2 advisors on. Amy is founder of CMO Mentor and founder of Launchbox. And it's a boutique marketing services firm that specializes in helping new and growing brands develop and execute their marketing strategy. And she's got she's been on a couple times and has experience around national and retail marketing, advertising, promotions, communications, e-commerce, collaboration, and just startups that are trying to build a marketing strategy. She has a lot of really good thoughts on, like, how do you even get there, right? How do you start to build a strategy? How do you figure that process out? So I want to welcome you today, Amy.
Thank you. I don't even have to give an elevator pitch. You did it.
And then I have Stephen Price as well, and he is CEO and of Startup, and he's also a startup advisor. He's been CEO, vice president, entrepreneur, and he's built and successfully exited 3 companies in the UK. He's also currently involved with 3 startups in tech, social media, and a product in the US. He's consulted in multiple startups and established businesses, and he spent a long time in automotive. So he does one of his focus points is in helping startups with both strategy, go-to-market, concept validation, market viability, right? All the steps that you need to go through. So when you're going through that as an entrepreneur, for all of you entrepreneurs that are aspiring, the more you do it, the more you learn the process, and it's very similar. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. You follow the same protocol. Doesn't matter if it's service or retail, slight differences. So I want to welcome you to the call as well, Stephen.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Looking forward to speaking to everybody today. I think this will be my third time doing this now. I think one of them was by accident, but this is definitely the second time I've organized with you guys.
Yeah, really, really enjoy having you on. And just to kick things off, curious, either Stephen or Amy, and again, while they're talking, if you guys have questions, go ahead and type in your questions. And feel free to write. Startup Accelerator member, I have Kasha on double checking as well, but it just makes it easier to go quickly. And if we get additional time, we will answer anybody's call who's on as well, but we start with Accelerator members. Either Stephen or Amy, curious, there's a lot of events happening right now. We've been in COVID. We now have a lot more going on with, recent activity from protests to riots. Just curious from either of your perspectives for entrepreneurs, for, businesses, curious any advice that you could give. A lot of the people tend to be more early entrepreneurs, a little bit earlier on in their stage. but there are some established businesses as well. So just curious, it could be anything that's relevant. I know you guys both deal with a lot of businesses and are talking to a lot of entrepreneurs. Just curious if there's anything that would be value added for the call to kick things off.
I think really what has come apparent with recent events, both with COVID and now the Black Lives Matter movement, which is ongoing, is an entrepreneur. I think it's really, really relevant that you have to be agile and you have to be realistic about what you're doing. And product viability or concept viability can change in a heartbeat. In fact, I've been speaking to one of the co-founders labs members who divulged a project and concept that they've been working on, and that was back in February. And I spoke to this guy yesterday and advised him that the entire concept now has to be revised based on his model due to COVID, not what's currently going on. My point being is that as an entrepreneur, trip-ups and hazards happen all the way along, even through experienced business builders and growth experts, that you've got to be ready and prepared to accept what's going on around you and then adapt if you can adapt. And if you can't adapt, personally, I believe that you maybe have to face the realism that you may have to box your idea away for some time until the market comes back around to normality if it's affected by so. Because we get so involved and become so indulgent in our own concepts and beliefs that something's going to be successful, some people can pursue when they really, really shouldn't. And getting advice is a great start to do that, because otherwise you're going to waste a hell of a lot of money and time. So just being very agile and realistic about what you're doing right now based on what's happening in the world.
Yeah, great suggestion. Do you need to pivot? Do you need to pause? Do you need to potentially kill a business?
Yeah.
Amy, anything else to add to that, or other
Well,
insights?
the one thing I would add is that a couple of things have happened. So one, and I listened to a great podcast, which I'll give a plug to. It's How I Built This. It's an NPR podcast, and it's all entrepreneurs, and you never know what you're going to learn. There's always an interesting tidbit in there. So one thing is COVID basically moved technology ahead 10 years. So we're in a place with group chats and things like that and online meetings that we would have gotten to in 10 years. And now technology is racing to catch up. And the other part of that is business as we know it is never going to be the same. So I see opportunity everywhere. And in the line of pivoting, you just look at how the market is changing and how things are growing and say, okay, there's so much opportunity there. Like, how does what I'm doing fit that? Or how can I pivot it to help it fit that and be really ready to jump when the market's moving back in? Or does what I'm doing help the market sort of move forward?
Yeah, I mean, even with recent events, like, do we have accountability tools you could create, right? Do we have other solutions in place that could be adapted or put into place that solves some of what's happening nationwide, right? So there's a great opportunity for tools, solutions. What can we do? So again, just get you thinking, what can I do in this climate to solve, to innovate, as entrepreneurs, we're problem solvers.
And also, maybe at this point, what it's done, it's prompted something maybe within you. Maybe do I need to include this in this early stage about what part of our ethos, part of our ideology of what we're trying to do as a business? Are we going to try to promote diversity within our hiring system, for example? Is this driven by the current narrative, or is this something that's dear and close to you and you believe in as an organization? And I think in both of those elements, I think it's absolutely a big point and a big talking point and an opportunity to make sure that you are doing what you believe is ethically correct with your business. So it's a good fact check on some things that maybe weren't in your mind at this point, as you're just focusing on some of the things that Josh mentioned, your advisory team, your MVP, your legal requirements, setting up an LLC, something as basic as that. It's quite easy to miss what's going on, despite it being in the forefront of all of our lives right now.
Great. So, and then just to dive in, we'll start to dive in. I see some questions. So again, just to highlight, do you need to stop? Sometimes entrepreneurs will keep running. Sometimes you need to look around the brick walls and find another solution or pivot or adapt. And sometimes you need to pause or put something on hold or let it go. I've had to do that a couple of times with businesses, and it's super frustrating when it's your baby.
Yeah.
but market conditions may have changed your market or thrown you out there. So really good questions to ask. So Joseph had a question. Your question was, how do I value my company to give equity out in exchange for services? So Joseph, are you, let's see if I can unmute you real quick.
Right here. Hello.
Okay, there you are. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So if you just say your 30-second elevator pitch, so we have some context.
Okay. So our company basically is trying to, it's in the elderly department. We're trying to find a way to get all the elders into the right care that they need, so that they can, they can be cared for less money, because at that stage they basically have very little income and they need to find a way to get all the treatment and health related expenses covered. So in this, because of that, we're trying to go through the development of platforms and apps and everything that we need. And we're trying to reduce as much as possible paying using cash. We want equity instead. But since we just built the company, the evaluation is not there yet. How do I tell somebody who tells me an app is going to cost me 50K? Okay, well, how about I give you 5% of the company in exchange for those 50K and some kind of, how do I do the negotiation basically?
Yeah, great question. So if I'm hearing you, you're saying, how do I structure equity in exchange for services?
Yes, correct.
Stephen, or do you have any thoughts on that initially? If not, I could jump in, but curious if you have any initial thoughts.
Yeah, I've got some initial thoughts on that. So every advisor, I think, has a different view on valuations, and there's in most industries there's multiple ways of valuing a business. In the instance we're talking about now, it's a concept, okay? It's something you're creating. I'm under the presumption from what you've just conversed to us that you're not an actively, you're not an active business actually, so you have no revenue generation. So some companies, particularly tech companies in certain spaces, have an easier time of getting valued because there's comparisons. There's relative apps, there's relative functioning businesses out there whereby you can sort of determine some sort of market value. In something, if it's an original concept, it's a first in the market type idea or vision, then it's very, very, very hard to value a business. And honestly, I'm a bit of a mean guy when it comes to giving advice on valuations to some of the people that I do. Like most things in life, something's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. And quite often a concept, people aren't really willing to pay for anything for that. And so it's about you, it's about what you can sell in terms of what the business can be, having the right people around you to advise you in that way. And then ultimately it's going to be the people you're approaching. So if, for example, you're approaching somebody, then you want them to build an application and a platform. And like you said, they're saying that our services are $50,000. And then that's got to be compared relative to what maybe your input is financially and where you're at as a business, which would, in most cases, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, is zero, which I tell a little bit, your business is worth zero right now because there is nothing behind it. There's no revenue stream. There's no JVs. There's no affiliation agreements. If it's product based or e-commerce based, you've got no POs. So, like I said, if there's a comparable, you could do that. So negotiations are going to be honestly quite difficult in those scenarios, and you may have to entice somebody by selling yourself, selling your company, and maybe put in an equitable interest to the point where you can gauge their interest over a conversation. Some of it would be face-to-face meetings and, I don't know, subversively making some comments or suggestions on and trying to gauge what their response is, looking at their eyes, see what gets them to lean forward, what gets their ears engaged. So it's a real hard process without knowing your business, to be quite honest.
Yeah, the other piece that I'll
Thank you.
Just one other piece that I'll add in is I'll second what Stephen said. It's really difficult to value a business. It's more of an art than a science. There's a lot of processes, but especially in the startup realm, it's really a conversation and it's an art process of, and again, what can you do to stack the decks? Sometimes having a strong executive team, of course, having your traction, revenue, users, and a strong team are the variables that increase the value. And the further along the project you get, the higher the valuation, right? And I know when we've had Erica on, who does a lot of investments. If you have a lot of things, if you have traction, you have revenue, you have your executive team in place, you have an advisory team in place, and you're moving, a lot of times there could be anywhere in the range from 5 to 7 million when you're doing evaluation. Sometimes it could be earlier on a lot less. And again, it's from what Steven said, you're comparing to other industries, so there's no blanket, right? You kind of got to get in. But what I will say has been interesting is you can also use what's called a safe note. And that can be interesting, where you basically are giving, it doesn't set a valuation. Sometimes it doesn't set a valuation. And you're basically giving a future discount. You're giving a discount on future valuation. So that can be another strategy to use as well.
The one thing I would add is that you ultimately want to launch a platform, but maybe that's not step 1. Maybe it's step 2, step 3. So the question I would ask is, what can you do in step 1 that isn't as much money to start gaining market validation and market traction to then help attract someone, to come in and build your valuation? So I'm not sure exactly where you are in the process, but could you do a landing page and start surveying people to make sure, the customer need and the customer fit was there? Start kind of there and start building your case study for why this is solving a need, which will then help you build the valuation and sell the project.
Absolutely. I mean, that's great advice, because what Amy's saying there is essentially there are multiple platforms out there that you can use that are very cost effective and almost negligible. I mean, if you've got your website, your URL purchased, you've got some basic branding and logo going, it doesn't have to be the home run branding and identity, what you're aiming to get, but you can easily use a templated website builder, which practically anybody with any sort of computer basic usage can make. You can make a small website and then test your market, test the interest in it, see if you can gain a little bit of traction, and then that gives you a lot more power and a much better position then to go to some sort of negotiation, maybe to, in this case, a DevOps team, an engineering team, a software team, whatever that looks like for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Amy and Stephen. I'm going to go to Gary. Gary Todd had a question. He says, you've just been funded. If you're still on. Hi, there you are. So sounds like you just received some funding to build a SaaS platform for improving resilience of the childcare market. Question, do you already have anything built like an MVP, or is it just conceptual?
We've got a demonstrator that was built as an iOS app, but we are funded to build the desktop application, which the local authority will use primarily. But also it's a multi-sided platform, so both the service providers and the parents will get to use it as well.
And congrats on getting some capital. And second, what is your biggest question around it? Is it building out the tech? Because you said, what are 3 things you would do to best chance of success for which piece? There's a lot of components there. Which piece do you feel like you need the more support? Is it in building out the technology on a shoestring budget? Is it building out the team? Is it structuring, which part of that?
Sure. So we can do things like partner engagement with the councils and a range of things that come from our expertise in the sector. But there's a lot of moving parts to the tech development, and we're bringing in 2 full stack developers to join the team, which we may have to give them some equity as well, just as key hires at the beginning, and to get the best people we can for the money. But it's really, what's the things that we should focus in on, apart from just establishing an agile development workflow and those sort of things. We've got a good idea of what we're doing, but it's both exciting and scary starting off a project like this, and we've got a desire to get it right the first time, and maybe that's unrealistic, I don't know, but we want to give ourselves the best chance to be successful.
Yeah, I'll give you my take on it, and then Amy and Stephen, if they have any other comments. So we've seen quite a bit where people invest a lot of money into developing technology and they have problems. and they end up trying to pivot, trying to make changes. So I'll give you a couple high level bullets that are important. One, I highly recommend you build out the UI first, meaning before you move into development, you actually build a working, let's call it like a flow, where you actually have a working model. Now you're sitting down with either a UI UX designer, or you're just mapping it out and then having a designer come in and make it look good. And then lastly, you're bringing in the development team. Where I see people make mistakes is they try to build as they figure it out, and it's really expensive. So again, you save money if you map it out first, and even you can do it with no technical background on like prototyping tools and just understanding the workflow process. Second, when you do bring on a tech team, I would make sure you have somebody very experienced that knows that world really well. Like we even have advisors on our advisor network. And Kasha, if you'd post the access to the co-founders advisors network, we have a couple really high-end CFOs of like major companies that know all the different types of code out there, even just to say, this is the approach that they're using. Does this make sense? For example, and just kind of getting somebody else that you trust to check the code they're doing, because sometimes people use outdated code. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things. So that for me on the technology side is, and then start with the least amount of features, really start minimal. And again, think, fail fast. Do the opposite of kind of what you said, is make it perfect and not fail. Try to flip your mindset on its head and say, I'm going to fail a bunch. How do I build the baseline tech? And then look at it like I'm testing. So, because all your expenses are going to come in additional features and additional things that you build on. So trying to build it all up front is a little confusing. So start off with, what is my primary value proposition? How am I able to deliver that? And then let me get it in front of users actually testing before I start to add additional features on. So you're kind of getting lean startup methodology. You're getting feedback and failing as you go to figure out what works and what doesn't. But that from a big picture perspective, that'll save a lot of time. I've spent so much time in developers and then redone it because I haven't mapped it out ahead of time. And I've seen that happen a couple times too. Anything else to add to that? Either Stephen or Amy?
The only thing I would add is, well, it's not really adding, I think it's just supplementing, is in today's world, like there is no start and end to a project, especially a tech project. So it's build and iterate, build and iterate, build and iterate. So as you think about sort of what those core things are you're offering at the first run, like maybe also like write out a roadmap. These are the features and this is the order in which I want to approach them, right? Tackle one at a time, like they're saying. So just think about the long-term product roadmap.
I think one of the things that you pointed out was yourself was that you want to get it right the first time, which in my experience is nigh on impossible. But it's also okay to be afraid of what's ahead. Okay, that's part of being an entrepreneur. And so what Josh is essentially saying is about building your MVP, doing as much as you can for as little as possible. That is essentially what an MVP is. And so it's much better to do that, figure out the fundamental basics of that UI, of the platform, and the user engagement is so important because that's where you're going to get your feedback on the errors and the issues with it. And in my experience with a couple of tech startups I've been involved in, and one that is currently, is even just the basics of going across iOS to Android as well for users, for a user experience, is so different, and they each bring up their own issues and problems. And like Josh said, if you're getting an equitable interest developer or developers in at this stage, it's probably going to cost you a lot of money, and there's going to be numerous errors, and you won't know what those are until you have a functioning platform. You have to mitigate those problems by getting people to interact with it. It really is the only way.
Yeah, think what's the minimal that I could do to get out and start selling and generate revenue and traction? Just really basic. And if you can get that going, you're going to be able to continue to grow and fund the business or raise capital or get loans against it, or there's a lot more you can do. But just be thinking, how do I get revenue in the door? And that means I have to have users that want to use this, and it's a product that works.
Gary, just one last thing, because you mentioned about the councils. Is that your market access route? Is that how you're getting there because you've got some sort of prior agreements with councils that are going to use this platform for the purpose of what your company's doing?
Yeah, so the platform facilitates them to meet their legal duties. So they have to do what our platform offers, and they can't fully do it at the moment. So we've got a great opportunity to sell into the local authorities, and then that's the first step, and then the multi-sided bits come in. So we've got 2 revenue streams, the service providers as well.
So I think the important part there is you obviously have quite a unique route to market there with those sorts of channels. So you could effectively be working on that market access and the revenue generation in the background while you're doing this MVP. It doesn't sound to me like you need to have it fully functional to go and do that, because they've got the interest level now. So I think you're in a pretty good position. So take Josh and Amy's advice on this, absolutely, and my advice, and guys, take a few steps back, get that MVP functioning, get users involved, but then also focus time on getting those agreements with those local councils, because it sounds like you really do have a unique product and it'll just be a quick revenue generator. You'll be able to get straight to the business, essentially.
Yeah, thanks. That's really helpful. It's very confirming what you said. Everything that you said is really in line with how we were thinking. It's great to have that independent confirmation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Okay, I'm going to go over to, and it's more of a startup question around, Michael has a question about if I'm setting up a corporation with equal shares, would founders be covered, or is it a founders agreement also needed? And I think it's a really important question when you're starting a startup. It's like a divorce, right? Like there is the number one reason for startup failure is actually startup problems between founders. So a couple suggestions is I always like to do, even before the actual agreement's in place, I like to do a what if scenario personally, where I basically go over what if I leave, what if you leave, what if I get hurt, what if you get hurt, like play out any scenario you could think of and just talk about it. And what I'll tell you is right off the bat, if there's any challenges there, you already got a problem. If you can just sit around and have a conversation and talk through logic and go, this happens, we're going to do this, put it on paper, this happens, put it on here. And you basically walk through all the what if scenarios. That I think is essential first. And again, if you see a red flag, trust it. I'm going to tell you that because I've been through some bad breakups in business partnerships. Second, everybody, if you have multiple founders, you need to vest. And what it does is it just protects you all. If you're all in this in the beginning, vest over a period of time. So if everybody's vested over a period of time, if somebody's gung-ho in the beginning and then they leave in 2 months and you've given them equal shares, they now bail and the rest of you are carrying the rest of that weight. So nobody gets, if you're all joining together and it sounds like there's a team, everybody takes time and is vesting together. Now, if one person is starting it or having more, somebody's putting up the money, or again, this is where it's creative. It's more of an art than a science. If somebody feels like they need to have a little bit more shares or skin in the game to make the deal happen, it just needs to be agreed upon. So my initial last piece would be, I think there definitely needs to be an operating agreement, and that what if scenarios can just be an addendum. That's at least how I do it. And it needs to just discuss it because legal fees can get really high in the beginning. So you want to have a structure, but if you talk about the what ifs, you already have something like written down that everybody signed, that at least you've talked through scenarios. Anything else to add to that, Stephen or Amy?
A huge part of an entrepreneur's early journey in most startup business, one of the most important factors, in my opinion, that is regularly missed is risk mitigation. And this is part of risk mitigation. This is essentially like what Josh is saying, is you can be going into business with your best buddy. You've been high school buddies, college buddies, and right now everything is amazing. I am telling you now, that means nothing. It can quickly go sour, it can quickly go south, and it can quickly get messy, no matter how great and strong the relationships are now. So the best thing that you can do is cover every part legally in a document. And in my opinion, an operating agreement is absolutely essential in every structured business, in every setup. And then in terms of your distribution, your equity distribution, obviously dependent on the number of founders, at this stage, I think it's quite a good idea as well to assess the need for other people within your organization as part of your roadmap, your business plan, your strategic plan, your go-to-market strategy. So if, for example, there are 4 partners over a 25% equal share, I think even early in the stage that everybody says, okay, for example, we're going to assign 5% each. So we're going to allow 20% for our acquisition of advisors or a CTO or some key senior players. And it's the time is then to do it, because quite quickly what can happen is if in the scenario that you're successful, that your business gains traction very quickly, and all of a sudden you get these increases in valuations, money skews people, money changes people. And it can even do that to the best and strongest relationships in business. So operating agreement, get the equity and the share distribution assigned early, make sure everything's documented. There's enough, I mean, something like LegalZoom, which is fairly cost effective. There's also a lot of free information out there that you can do, and get an advisor, go and co-founders and get an advisor who's particularly good in that part of the structure. And they can give the best advice. That wouldn't be me, but I'm sure within one of the 50 advisors, there is somebody that has a really strong experience and background in that area. So tie it up early, for sure.
Anything else, Amy? Have you had any good or bad with partners and lessons you've learned from that?
Nobody ever shares good stories, but you hear about the ones that go bad, and they do. I think it's one of the, like you said, it's like a marriage. It's one of the most important relationships in your life. You're going to spend a lot of time with that person. Make it easy. Get it on paper.
Yeah, and the only other thing is make sure you like the people. It should seem like common sense, but some people get so attached to the idea that they're not really paying attention to like, oh wait, do I actually like this person? Because you're going to be working so long with them. Make sure you really enjoy that process, right? Like it should be fun. It should be like you're on a sports team and you guys are rallying towards the finish line.
And I'd like to just finish on this just real topic, a real quick experience of mine, real world experience, business partner. We went into business together in 2007 in the UK. Developed a business that grew very quickly within a year. It was doing really, really well. I gave him 30% of the business, essentially took my eye off the ball. You learn through mistakes and errors as a successful business person, in my opinion. Huge error I did. Completely trusted him with the business because I moved on to a couple other business interests. Even though I was a majority shareholder, he basically took at that time it was a £2.3 million valuation business. He took that to zero within 16 months, and I had no way of stopping it because of some financial irregularities that he'd included himself in. And that's somebody I'd known for 20 years at that point. So that is a real world experience, guys. It does happen.
Yeah, one more war story. I had a company in 2007. I came into as a 25% owner. Didn't change the structure when I started investing money. One of the worst. I was just like, oh, we're in the project, whatever it takes to succeed. Didn't adjust the agreements. We grew the company to 7 figures first year, and we're on a great trajectory. And that's when 2008 hit, and the business came crashing down. And as it was going from like $140,000 months to $30,000 months, we started fighting. And I came home one day, and he literally picked up the business and left. He just bailed. And so again, it was one of those things where I didn't have proper agreements. I was so busy on focusing on let's get the goal line that then when it came crashing down, and there was a lot of problems when we started making good money. When you're a startup and you don't have any money, it's different because you're like, we don't have any money anyway. When we started making, 60K, then 80K, then 100K, all of a sudden he felt more justified to start spending money in all these places. So again, it was, if you don't have it tight up front when you don't have money, it just exacerbates the problems once you do. And a lot of things happen. Like I remember he was spending like 20 grand a year. I was like, what? So it was a little crazy. So just make sure you tighten things down and it's in place, and you have things like what can we spend without checking with the other partner? How much freedom do we have? Like a lot of that stuff's really important to set before you have money.
And particularly with the money part of this, guys, if financials, accounting, etc., aren't your strong point, and you either have a partner or a co-founder, or you bring in a CFO or someone in that sort of role into your business, early on at this stage is a great time to get in the paper and the literature and the verbiage that you have access to all financial accounts and information at any time that you request or desire to. because trust is easy to it's quickly to gain trust. And that is a huge error that I made earlier on in my career, was just basically trusting someone with all the money, trusting them with the person. It was a bad mistake. So make sure you always have access. You don't have to be a financial person, but always have access, and have that written down early on.
Yeah, good lessons from the front line. You learn a lot when you lose a lot. And I've had 2 businesses fall out because of bad mistakes. Another was a film company that I spent 6 years in, and all of a sudden wasn't working and didn't have structure in place because it was a good buddy of, same thing, another 10-year buddy that we went into business, and I skipped the steps. So don't skip the steps, take the time, just do the litmus test, walk through the what if scenarios. Oh, last thing I was going to say, one of the things that we put in is we have an outside agency value it. That's another one, is like, who determines valuation if there's a problem and you need to change it. So we would write in, if it's over 250,000, then there's an outside agency we hire to value it, or 2 outside agencies. So it's just again, if you don't have any money in the beginning, put the number you want, but you start making money and it reverts back to that and you need to exit. How do you even decide what the valuation is, right? How do you decide what you pay out, what you do? So that was another one we wrote in, is an outside agency. We'll take a look at it. So, okay, moving on to Charles. Charles, I'm going to unmute you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Charles, if you just also introduce yourself and your elevator pitch for your startup.
Yes, my name is Charles MUKASA, and my startup is CyberAuthentic, New Jersey based. Our mission is to enable foolproof identity authentication without sacrificing privacy. So we are developing a B2B product that blocks 100% of internal phishing emails for a business without collecting any private user data. And I've already built the APIs to prove the concept. Right now, our immediate target is healthcare insurers with 5,000 employees and above. And we are ready to schedule the demos and solution interviews, mostly to refine our MVP requirements before we build an MVP. But our problem, in a way it's a good problem, is we have contacts in a number of these organizations because I worked in the industry for 13 years, but we don't have a strategy for how to take advantage of these contacts. Some of them we are ready to schedule with them, but we don't want to get there and totally fail to take advantage.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, how do I take kind of if I'm hearing you, the MVP that you've built, how do you start to navigate with some of the partners that you have? Is that the part that you're trying to navigate?
No, we have not built the MVP. What we are doing is, although we have built sort of proof of concept code because I'm doing it myself, but we don't want to define what the MVP is. We want to go to these targeted customers, potential customers, and give them a sort of like general, a framework, a backbone, I mean, like bare bones statement of what are the requirements for the MVP are, and get the input. It's sort of like a solution interview.
Got it. I understand what you're saying. Amy, do you want to speak in on this? I think
you're very much talking about doing some customer research to make sure that the product you build fits their needs.
Exactly.
So the way I would approach that, again, is looking at sort of a roadmap. So part of the interview process is getting their feedback, but you're also engaging them in the product. And the more engaged they get, the more invested they are in seeing it be successful and like working with you when it comes out. So you want to find sort of, who's my ideal customer? How do they fit in this picture? And then start working with them from day one and explain sort of the long-term strategy. Want to talk to you now about some features. Would you be willing to come back and test it when I've built the first, MVP? Want to, bring you along with me. And it may be that you want some people in that mix that can then turn around and give you testimonials when you're ready to launch, and they can talk about the value of the product. So think about who your core user is going to be, and that kind of can inform who you want to be as part of that first research model. And then you can decide, like, maybe your first round is less people than when you're a little bit further along and you've refined more of the features, right? And then you're going to go out to a broader net if you're going to do another round of research. So just think of it as everything these days. It's an iterative process. And as much as they're giving you information, you're trying to engage them in what you're doing. And so you're sort of the ABCs or ABSs, always be selling, right? And make sure you're talking to those people who can help you long-term.
Okay. Makes sense.
It sounds easy, doesn't it?
Sounds easy, but say when I'm scheduling the meeting, I've gotten those main points about when I'm there.
Yeah.
But when I'm scheduling the meeting, say I'm doing it by email or something like that, what is the kind of language I should use to make sure that?
This kind of reminds me of like a marketing funnel question. And the way I look at a marketing funnel is that first outreach is very generic. The person doesn't know much about what you're doing unless they're a colleague or someone you've talked to about it before. So it's very simple. It's very straightforward. Do you have 5 minutes to chat about my new project? And as people engage with you further, you give them more information and you bring them along into the project. You can't send out an email that explains what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, and a ton of detail, because people will open those and go, oh, I can't read it, and just close it. So you want to make it easy for them to say yes. So your first question is really like, do you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to talk to me about, this project I'm working on in the blah, blah, blah area? I think your expertise would be invaluable.
Yeah.
Or spin on that.
Okay. One thing which we are already working on, one of our people is animation. We are doing some animation internally, like a video, again, to avoid developing any code beyond the APIs. How can we leverage that? The quality is good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And it's explaining your product.
Yeah, it explains the product, obviously makes it look as if it's the real product. It's not there.
So there's a couple of ways you can maximize the use of that. Like if you have a landing page, you could incorporate the video, like click here to learn more. You can incorporate it into your communications. When I talk about a marketing funnel, like that first one is like, do you have time to talk to me? There'll be a stage in the conversation with them where they're engaged enough that you think that they're going to click and watch the video. I don't think necessarily sending that out to them up front will always get a click. But if they've been in communication with you and they're moving down that communication funnel, then at some point that'll be the perfect thing to present to them. The key is thinking about how much information you want to provide and at what point in that conversation.
Okay. Yeah, this is very, very, very good advice. I feel better.
It always comes down to a lack of time. People don't have a lot of time, so they want things to be easy. And from a marketing perspective, always apply what I call the stupid consumer law. Like you're talking to the stupidest consumer in the world. If they can understand it, then anyone can understand it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. I want to go to Alpha. Alpha, can you hear me? Let's see. Where are you at? Are you still on the call? Alpha. Can you hear me okay, Alpha? If not, I may come back. It's about business models. So I had a question there, but I'm going to come back to you, Alpha. So next question, I just want to say, hey, Sam, I saw your note about looking for somebody to advise you. I would definitely check. Kasha posted a link in the chat to the Co-Founders Lab Advisor Network. Look into somebody there that you think would be useful and helpful. And that might help walk you through. And okay, cool. I'm going to go to the next question. And I saw this question a minute ago. Let me just make sure I got this pulled up. Okay, so basically the general question, this is from Trey. And your basic question was, what resources would you recommend to build out your MVP with no capital? Is that correct? You still on, Trey? Anybody else this resonate with as well in case Trey's not here? Common question, it's good to know. I'm going to dive in even if Trey is not still on. I don't see Trey still on, but I'm going to answer this question anyway. Really, really helpful question. I can't tell you how many people think of a concept and they jump right into hiring developers to try to build it out. In my opinion, not the way to go. There's a bunch of prototyping apps. I think it's even called like prototyper tool, wireframing tool. If you Google like wireframing, prototyping, anything you can think of around that, you'll start to find there's actual like subscriptions that are really inexpensive, and you can build out a full prototype as an entrepreneur with no background in tech. It just takes time. I've done it a couple times where you walk through the process of what a user would go through to walk through the MVP. And think of the MVP as what it is, minimal viable product. You want to make sure, does this thing work? Can I have something walk through a process and basic work? And can I get users to say, I would use this, right? Like you start off with saying, is there a just to talk about this process, because I think it's really important with market validation. And it's the same thing you do with going to market at a later stage. First, your basic question is, I got a great idea. What do I do next? Next question is prove that there's actually a problem, that people admit there's a problem. Prove it with data. Next, you want to move into, all right, well, what solution will solve this problem? And are users willing to tell me that they would pay to use this product or they would like to use this product, right? And you can do that through even, I've seen, landing pages created just to get, product, people saying, yes, I want to buy the solution. It makes sense. Landing pages, messages, emails, there's a ton of ways you can prove that with data. And then building a basic level MVP, it's just enough for people to say, I like the concept, users are actually using it. So again, I think people make it really difficult. Oh, there you are, Trey. I see you now. Did you have a specific question on that, or want to go a little bit deeper on that? You want to say just your 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, so it's a application that basically the idea, we have the business plan for it, but it's a social networking platform for Christians to connect from church to church. There's a lot of apps out there that are within their building, within the walls. And so we're just trying to go beyond that through events, e-commerce, advertising, really circulate that ecosystem. So that's the main concept behind it.
Great. And where are you at with it? It sounds like you're pretty early on, right?
Yep. So we've done the idea, we've done the business plan, we've created sketch and wireframes, we've done the mock-ups, we've done a lot of the paperwork. So right now we're just I'm a non-technical founder, so really learning the technical side, trying to do the very basics on hacking and getting from there. So I'm just kind of looking through resources, trying to figure out the best way to create that MVP.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing all the right steps. If you have the wireframing essentially mocked out, it also makes it easiest to send, even when you're looking for a technical co-founder. It makes it easier if you can show them, here's the prototype, like here's exactly what we're building, because then you even makes the decisions like, what are we going to build it on? What kind of technology? And again, it sounds like if you're doing it for something like that, you may be able to even find somebody that's passionate about it, that wants to solve that problem with you. So it's kind of like, at least how I've always done it is I keep hustling to keep moving it forward as I'm simultaneously looking for a co-founder or somebody to fill that spot. But it's one of the questions I would ask is, how can I get really creative? Like, how can I get really creative around this? And what else does that look like? Could I potentially go to all the churches that I want to be participating in this? And could they sponsor it, right? Like, how can you think outside the box of like, I need to get this built. So for example, if you have it prototyped, you can go to 5 different companies to ask them how much it costs to build and get quotes. Now you have quotes in mind if you get it built out. You also have tech co-founders that you're interviewing along the way to say, okay, right? So you're kind of just running forward as if you're going to build it no matter what, and going to companies to build it out for you, getting specs. And now you're saying, it'll probably be 1 to 250 if you go to well-established firms. And then you say, could I cut that down substantially to a tech co-founder just doing it by themselves or a small team? But that's kind of my suggestion on that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably share your same passion for wanting to get something off the ground with no budget. So I think it's a valid conversation of how do you think creative? They say it's never a matter of resources. It's always a matter of resourcefulness. And how do you be resourceful? Any other thoughts on that? That same topic, Stephen or Amy?
Yeah, I mean, geez, that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit, right? It's somebody that gets this idea and you're a go-getter, beyond a thinker or just an idea creator. Sometimes it's just your willingness to do hard work, to do the slog. And in this case, like Josh mentioned, can you also, without even pushing too deep into your platform or how you're idealizing this concept? I mean, if it's going to be app-based, which most technology elements are now, technology-based businesses are now, but can you again go back to, there's so many resources out there for basic learning and free information, that can you do something even when you build a small web page with a message board and a forum to get people interacting, and then go out and distribute that message? Are there databases that the churches are using to get communications out to their members, for example? Hey, we've got this now, and we've got this, it does this function. By participating in this, we believe it's going to be creating this message and this additional, like outside the initial ecosystem and growing that ecosystem. You've obviously got the entrepreneurial spirit to get to where you are now. It's about now using that in any way you can to enhance your product without the financials. If you don't have the financials, that's it. But also, again, there's another million or millions of people like you with great ideas and at this stage. So it's very easy in this day and age with platforms like Co-Founders Labs, and there are other options out there, but you can go and find a co-founder, somebody with your level of interest in this topic that can bring that knowledge to it, which you miss. And as long as you admit that, listen, I've got this huge chasm in knowledge in this space or in this business, I need to fill that, then you're going to have to do that anyway. So maybe now's as good a time as any to start engaging in conversations while you're doing the groundwork. But it would be great to show somebody, hey, I've got my LLC set up, I've got XYZ done, and now look, I've got this web page or this small 2 or 3 page website where I've got people engaging on, and it's sort of built around the concept of what I'm trying to create. Amy?
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be very similar to what these guys said and what I've said before. People think of an MVP as this, I've got to build a model, and ultimately you can have 10 MVPs, and each one is an iteration, and it's a tiny step forward. There's some great articles out there on the internet about different types of MVPs. Some of them are fake it till you make it, right? You have a web page and you're basically faking all the functionality on the back end to see if it works and if customers like it. I see someone put in the forum, do you need to build something? Take a look at what's on the market. Is the community you're trying to build, does somebody else already have that tech, just not with the community you're targeting? So piggyback if you can. There's a lot of, think of it as mini MVPs that take you one step closer to that launch MVP.
Okay, thank you guys.
Hey, on this subject, Amy, on the marketing front, because I know a lot of people, once they're kind of going, how do they get up and running, or how do they get customers? Any other, strategies for hacks around that with no budget, no money, creative ideas? I know, getting PR and reaching out to PR people, and just anything else creatively that could help.
So I have to start by saying I hate the term growth hack, because I don't believe in it. I don't think there is a shortcut.
There's no substitute for hard work.
Yeah, there's no shortcut for creating true customer relationships. But what I would say about startups, it's a little bit of like the joke, like if you want to find out if you need surgery, talk to a surgeon. So you're talking to a marketer. So I'm going to tell you to think about marketing from day one. And it's not that you need to be advertising or things like that, but you need to know who your customer is. You need to know the value proposition, and you need to be selling to them from day one. So everything you do, customer research, just having a landing page with a sign up spot on it, going and doing demos at street fairs. Every time you're out there in the market, you want to direct people to a website, you want to get their name, and you want to be able to go back and talk to them later. Because when you go to launch your product and you want to do an email, you go, oh crap, I didn't do this. So you may not think you need them right now, but just immediately start capturing names, contacts. How can I let you know? Be a part of this when it launches, sign up here. Just get that sign up box going as soon as you can, and always be driving people there.
And I'm sure, Amy, it'd be great to hear what you have to say on this, but in my experience, I mean, obviously people say social media as probably the most go-to way to market to an audience for a new product, etc. But you seem to be in a space as well that really is conducive to like a Facebook type marketing. And people don't realize Facebook is very, very cost effective. You could spend $10 a week and engage thousands and thousands of users, particularly when you've got a real focused demographic for your product. So you could actually get a great ROI and ensure that your money's being spent well. I don't know what you think, Amy.
Yeah, what I would say is, for most people who aren't like knowledgeable about how those platforms works in terms of advertising, to keep in mind that Facebook and Google and all of their advertising platforms are first and foremost set up to make those companies money. So what we're talking about here, and what he just mentioned, is like being very specific on your target. It's counterintuitive, but the more targeted you are, the more you define who your customer is, the more you can think about who they are, what they do, their psychographics, and narrow that list, the more effective your advertising is and the better the ROI. And one of the best ways to make money on Facebook is to have your own customer list that you feed to them and say, build me a lookalike audience. So going out and sort of broad awareness ads, you think, great, I'm reaching a lot of people, but what you're doing is you're paying for eyeballs that may not be interested in your product. So you have to really think through who you're going after when you do those campaigns, and then they can be very effective. That's why I always tell people, start collecting names immediately.
Yeah, I mean, that really is the process, is how quickly can you get to market and fail fast. It's such a different mindset as entrepreneurs. And the same thing with marketing, right? Marketing isn't like have it perfect before it's done. I think so many entrepreneurs, including myself, have screwed up way too many times because I try to have it perfect and then it bombs and you're frustrated, right? Versus just getting out, testing, being okay with failure. Welcome failure as a part of the process to learn what works. So instead of the mindset shift of, oh, I got to have it perfect before I tell anybody or before I launch or all these other things, flip it to like, it's an agile thing that's developing as I go, and I learn through what doesn't fail. So I'm going to expect 80% to fail. What's the 20% that doesn't? It changes your mindset from like, oh, just get out there and test. Mm-hmm. This worked. These 7 things didn't. Okay, go more with this one, right? And if you keep following that mindset, you spend the least amount of money. You get data to tell you really quickly if it works or it doesn't. And what you'll find is don't be attached to the outcome. That's the hardest part, at least for me. I don't know what your guys is, but I want it to work because I'm attached to my baby and I want this baby this is the next $1 billion company. And then you get out in data and it bombs and you're like, no, right? Wait a second, come buy my product, and nobody wants to buy it. And you have to sometimes be willing to look in the mirror and go, all right, back to your initial point, Stephen, like, okay, do I walk away from this? Am I attached to it because I want it, or is it actually something that's going to scale in the marketplace? So just want to thank, I know we're getting up at 5 o'clock, so I wanted to thank both Stephen and Amy for joining us today's call. They are both advisors on our advisors network. I see a number of people have said, hey, this is super helpful. We do these calls every week, and we have advisors like Stephen and Amy on. You can also do a one-on-one session with either Amy or Stephen. Kasha just posted in the comments. It's really easy. All you do is click on the link. It takes you to the page, and you can access our vetted advisors, and you just book a one-on-one call. And it's a great chance to get feedback where they're there for your business and they're already vetted. In addition, if you want to jump on these weekly and get first in the queue to get your questions answered, Kasha also posted the link to the Startup Accelerator. And what I always like to do is take a group photo, super fun. And again, it's community. I think with what's happening right now, more than ever, it's just community that brings us together, right? We're community. And I want to have everybody turn their cameras on so we can see the community of smiling faces from all over the world, where we're coming together as one unit of entrepreneurs to innovate, to change, to make a difference, to make a better world. So if you guys will all turn on your cameras for a second, or whoever's feeling inclined, and we'll do a fun group photo from all over the world, all these different countries, different cultures, different races, different groups of humans coming together to collaborate to become stronger entrepreneurs. So everybody wave or do whatever they'd like to. Peace sign, whatever feels good to you. And I'll take a shot. Great. So great to see everybody smiling faces. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope everybody has a beautiful day. And thank you for joining. We'll be here next week. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Great to meet everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.